well, basically, I used one amp and one guitar. Well, actually, 3 amps. 3 amps, one guitar for the entire record. I used the same set of strings. I didn't change the strings. I used the same pick on everything. And it was over, it was, well, it was a couple of years actually. We originally did a tracking session and I got the basic ideas of what the songs were going to be. I knew they weren't going to be exact. I knew that, I was getting just rough ideas. And I basically engineered all that live with the exception of one track where Nicole engineered it for me. But otherwise, I engineered throughout the whole process. And, it was the band playing, and then that wasn't really happening. And so it just became drums and myself. And I knew, like I said, I was just giving them ballpark ideas for vibes and feels with, we'll say, loose arrangements. Because, I knew that I had to do the work. It was down the road, and I would have to get back to it just because of scheduling. It's just the way my life was at the time. So, but I did not get caught up in crazy gear or anything. It's just I've been using the same gear for 20 years. I just never did anything with it, So I used basically my main Marshall. It's a 69 Super Bass 100. I sent that out to Mark Abrahamian, and he did his thing to it. And so that was the main thing. And then I used to slave both heads. When I was running 3 heads, I had 1 preamp and 2 power amps, and I was slaving. After the mod came back, I couldn't do that anymore. The amp just became too high gain. So it didn't lend itself to being slaved anymore. So the Marshall literally is standalone, just runs on its own. And then the old Carbon that I have, that's being slaved with that Vi Legacy head. And that whole thing, my mocking, my trying to emulate an Ed thing, kind of a fair warning deal, that is used on every song on the whole record. It's the same thing. Now, what's been added to that equation, and also too, that's 2 cabinets. It's an Echoplex with a slapback on one side and the other side's dry. So it's just 2 cabinets, one dry, one wet with a slapback. The modulating effects go through both sides. So anyways, the guitar was just the Les Paul that I got, and I put on some really heavy strings, and that was it. And like I said, I just didn't think about it. I used to use a thin pick, now I use a really heavy pick. I used to use thin strings, now I'm using really heavy strings. I used to play a Strat, now I play a Les Paul. So for this, it was literally, I was trying to go back to my youth, and so I used the same rig I've been using for years and years and years. This is really the first time it's been captured in my whole entire life, I would say. This is the only time my setup's ever been really captured. So outside of that, Dweezil, who is a big part of my musical background, and also he's a big part of this record actually, because he kind of, I don't want to say he insisted, but he was like, you have to check out this piece of gear, and so when Dweezil gives me those sorts of tips, I usually will listen to him, obviously. So he was, really interested in getting me to try this fractal thing that he has. And so he gave me one of his fractals, one of his older ones. I just used a preset sound that he programmed into it. I think he called it the Brown sound. Maybe that's a preset or something, and then he modded it, or I don't know. Who named the preset or whatever, but he made it. I did not make it. He just gave me the thing. I started scrolling through it, and then I was like, oh, this one sounds good, right? And stayed there. So I didn't touch that thing at all. And so I was trying to think, well, how can I use this? And why would I even need to use it? And where does it fit in? When I played through it on its own, it's like, this thing is really badass. But it doesn't respond or react like an amp in any way, shape, or form for me. So, but I was getting like a blend that I liked. So ultimately what happened is Dweezil let me use this guitar splitting box and that fractal. And so on the record, everything, the way the panning scheme works is that my rig is hard left all the way to about 2 o'clock. As far as the clock goes. So hard left to about 2 o'clock. Then the fractal takes up everything from 2 o'clock over all the way down to 6. So you got the fractal rig, you got my rig, and together it does something really cool. So I was able to use what he wanted me to use, so I feel good that I actually did that, and that it truthfully worked. I was able to get it happening. There was a lot of grounding problems and things with the splitter box and trying to get all that stuff to work and whatever, but and it would also be very intermittent because where my studio is, sometimes you can get power anomalies and stuff coming through the powering, and so, you know, it was because I was running all these heads and then the side rig and that splitter box and the Echoplex and the other stuff. It was noisy, you know. I just had to play with it until I could get safe spots. And plus, I'm one of those guys where I use old chords. I don't use fresh, new, super high-end NASA style gear. Anytime I've used the real high-end cording and stuff, had custom pedal boards, and it sounds like shit every time. I use the cheapest cables. I've used the same cables ever since I got them, and I haven't changed since. And you know, decades. But again, it's not like I was out doing things. I'm like kind of in a parked place and doing stuff. But these cables have tone, so I use them all the time. What kind of cables are they? That I can't say. And it's not because I don't want to tell you, it's because I don't want to promote the company, because I'm not a fan of the company. So, what else can I say? So yeah, so I used the Les Paul in the entire thing, same set of strings, the entire thing. And that's it. I kind of say that as a little bit of a badge of honor because I'm playing these really heavy strings, and so it's like I can't put a dent into them. Well, for reasons I won't go into right now, but basically my hand strength is totally different than what it used to be. And I took a lot of time off from playing guitar before I started this record. So when I started playing the really heavy strings, my hands were forced to be relaxed. In other words, anytime I tried to dig in, the strings would counteract and go, no, don't do that. Or else you're going to hurt your fingers or cut them or whatever. And so it forced me to play a little bit differently, and I'm glad about that because to me it's kind of a more timeless approach is how I would describe it. Yeah, you guys can be the judge if ultimately you like what you hear, but it really was a different experience for me all the way around, other than my main rig, even though the Marshall was modded and you know, tweaked. Other than that, it was really basic, really simple. It was more about how I was feeling on the day I recorded the song. That, you know, whichever song we're talking about, I had to feel it in the moment, and I did that. So they were all recorded on different days. So there's not a lot of continuity, even though it's the same rig. Like I said, same guitar, all that stuff. So that's the main thing about that stuff.